Telephones. Today, everybody takes telephones for granted. Why, with the advent of cell phones, everybody has a phone now. That people just carry them in their hip pocket. In fact, I've got one here with me. And telephones have gotten incredibly expensive. Why, you can pay over $1,000 for a new iPhone. I don't keep track of it all. My iPhone is several years old, and it's not even the latest model. But when I was a kid, things were different. Telephones were not so common. It was unusual for a home to have more than one telephone. In fact, a lot of people didn't even have a telephone. Our telephone at our house was one of these black things. All telephones were black back then, and they were supplied by the phone company. You couldn't just go out and buy a telephone. And you parked it in a central place in your house, and it was rotary dial. You know the kind. And telephone numbers were shorter back then. Our telephone number had 2 letters, a 2-letter code, and then it had 4 numbers. And it was pretty easy to remember. Gee, now you have to remember 10 numbers in order to call somebody. That's amazing. Well, when I went to my grandma's house, though, things were different because she had one of those old made out of oak, wooden phones. It was about that wide and about that tall, maybe 16 inches tall, and it had this thing that stuck out the front that you talked into, one of these black things. And to call somebody, you had to turn a crank. And telephone service in her area, Camp Hill, Alabama, it was a small town, was rather backward compared to what we had in Florida. She had only party lines. That means anybody could pick up the phone, anybody on your line, and listen in on your conversation. Nothing was private. And everybody had their special ring. Now, Grandma's ring was 3 quick rings. And so if she heard 3 quick rings, ring, 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 she'd run to the phone. But it would ring no matter. The lady across the street was 2 quick rings. And if she heard 2 quick rings and she wanted to eavesdrop, she could go to the phone and pick up the earpiece and hold it to her ear and listen. Yeah, did I mention the earpiece was this separate thing that hung on the side, and you picked up the earpiece and hooked it, held it to your ear, and then you talked into the microphone that stuck out of the wooden box. Well, the funniest thing is what you did when you wanted to make a call. When you wanted to make a call, you had to talk to a live operator. They had one. And you would turn the crank on pick up the earpiece, turn the crank on the phone, and you could hear it go, and then you'd wait a second, and pretty soon this lady would come on, operator, what number, please? And then you would tell the number that you wanted to call. Now, in Camp Hill, there were only 2 digits. You only had to remember 2 numbers. So you would say, give me 62, please, or give me 78, please. Or you could just ask by name, like, give me Dale's Market, and you would be connected to the market. And so it was really quite different. I loved to talk on the phone at Grandma's house. At our house, it was just an everyday thing, no big deal. I had my friends, and it was nice when they called on occasions. But at Grandma's house, anytime I could talk on the phone, I would. And if Grandma needed to make a call, she knew that I liked it. And so she would say, hey, go call up Junior's store. And I would say, okay, what's the number? And she'd say, 62. And I'd go, operator, give me number 62, please. And pretty soon 62 would come on the line, and I'd hand the phone to Grandma, and she would do the talking. And that's the way phones were back then at Grandma's house. Oh, long distance. What about long distance? If you wanted to call long distance, there wasn't any direct dialing. You had to know what number you were going to call. And then you would, at our house in Florida, you would dial a 0. Zip, and pretty soon a live operator would talk. And she would say, yeah, what do you want? And you'd say, I'd like to place a long-distance call to Camp Hill, Alabama, to my grandma's house. Well, what's her number? Well, her number is number 58. 58? Yeah, that's right. Make it station to station, because back then you could call person to person or station to station. And I don't know technically the difference. I guess station to station went one place to the other. I know it took a long time for a call to go through. You had to sometimes wait 5 minutes, 6 minutes, maybe longer for a long distance call to go in. And if you were in Alabama and you wanted to call Dad down in Florida, because he didn't always go with us, you'd turn the crank and the operator would come on and you'd say, I'd like to place a station-to-station call to Pinellas Park, Florida, and the number is blah, 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 blah. And you'd wait and wait and wait and wait and wait, and you could hear the operator talking to other operators, and you could hear little switches, click, 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 and pretty soon the phone would ring, and Dad would pick up the phone and say, hey, what's going on, Dad? And we could talk. And that's the way phone calls were back when I was a kid. Quite different than today.